way through Junpei's nose and down his throat to pound against the entrance to his stomach. He put his hands over his mouth and struggled to keep what little was in his stomach where it belonged. Oh, LR. They didn't have to wonder where the body was. There was blood everywhere, a few arms of the splatter reaching towards them as they walked in through the door. All one had to do was follow the many radial arms to the source. The body itself was hidden behind a divider. June, you should stay here. But, please, just do me a favor, okay? Alright? He didn't give her a chance to say no. He put his hand on her shoulder as if to shove her into the ground like a tent pole, turned and walked toward the end of the divider. It felt like it took an eternity for him to get there. Santa and Lotus followed, timid and nervous as a pair of children. Eventually they reached the divider. Oh. They looked at one another and nodded, slowly. Junpei put his hands on the divider and peered around the corner. For a moment, he forgot to breathe. He felt his heart collapse in his chest like an empty cigarette carton, and time froze. He knew in that instant that he would take the image before him to the grave. What was left of the body sat in a sea of blood. Chunks of flesh, torn from the body, sat in the blood like tiny islands in a great red sea. How do they know it's Snake, though? A vast ragged hole had been torn in the torso, and what remained of his intestines spilled out of it like fresh spaghetti. I guess they can tell. Smaller chunks of meat had splattered against the wall and become stuck there as they dried. Globules of yellowish fat had left trails like tiny slugs as gravity pulled them down the wall, even as they dried to it. Just like Ace said. Santa's voice was strained. Junpei suspected he was holding down some vomit of his own. Just like the ninth man. The detonator in his bracelet set off the bomb in his gut. It looked as though the explosion had been quite powerful. His legs were both bent in an odd, unnatural way, and his left arm split open, exposing the painfully white bone of his ulna. His bracelet lay next to him. It seemed to have hit the wall hard enough to have shattered the display, which lay on the ground in pieces. Half of his head had simply collapsed. The blood coating almost made it look like raw pizza dough covered in tomato sauce. His clothes too were covered in blood. The burgundy tie, the white shirt, the jacket with the yellow piping, and the grey slacks. They were all familiar to Junpei. No mistake about that. It's Snake. Lotus's voice was unnaturally deep and strained, and Junpei heard it catch in her throat. Wow. At least she doesn't have to worry about someone being left behind now. I'm just wondering why it went off in the first place. I mean, if it didn't have a red next to it, and he could have just got through on his own, then why did it go off in the shower? And why was he in the shower anyway? Because I thought he was off searching the corridors with us. So why did he come back here and go through that door? And what are we doing back in the hospital? Aren't we going to search the L and the R that was written on the wall? The squeal of tortured metal made Junpei's teeth curl. It sounded like the noise a ghost would make. No matter how many times he heard it, he never got used to it. Every time it put him on edge. It didn't help that there was a girl nearby who looked far more like a ghost than a living human should. It was Clover. She sat on the edge of the bed, her head drooping listlessly onto her chest. Her eyes were blank and stared across the room at nothing. Her breathing was slow and mechanical. Aside from the rise and fall of her chest, she didn't move. Junpei felt as if even a nudge might cause it to shatter into 1,000 pieces. Snake was probably murdered. Chances are he was killed the same way the ninth man was. Seven lowered his voice, likely in an effort to keep Clover from hearing what he had to say. There were 4 other people in the room with Junpei and Seven: Ace, Santa, June, and Lotus. Seven looked at each one of them in turn and continued. It's pretty straightforward. Not that hard to figure out how they did it. First, the killers got Snake to authenticate on the red to open door number 3. Then they shoved him into it alone, and waited 9 seconds for the door to shut. Once that door shut, it was over for Snake, but he didn't give up. He probably knew it wouldn't do him any good, but he probably ran into the shower room looking for the dead. It was a small chance, but it wasn't like he had anything to lose. Unfortunately, it didn't work. The detonator is only deactivated if everybody who authenticated when they went in uses the dead. And then 81 seconds after he was shoved in. That happened. So the L and the R. All I can think of is Lotus. Lotus. R. What the R mean though? Only thing is the L is Lotus. And the R could stand for red, but I don't understand that. That doesn't make any sense. I'm suspecting Lotus though. But again, was she with me? I can't remember if she was with me or not. Oh, I see. So that's what you meant by killers, huh? You need at least 3 people to open one of the numbered doors, including Snake. It would open for Snake and a single killer. Exactly. That means we're looking at multiple perps here. Junpei crossed his arms and grunted. Well, just in case, I want to make sure. Let's say you're right. When do you think Snake was killed? When we all split up to look for the parts for the Reds, I think. Right after that, when we noticed he was gone. Then that means none of us have alibis. We were all off searching the rooms we've been assigned, looking for those parts. Yeah. That means anybody could be a killer. Wait a minute. What are you talking about? Jun seemed shocked. How can you say one of us is a killer so casually? Well, not just one of us. If I'm right, then at least 2 of us are murderers. Why don't you calm down a bit, sir? What are you gonna gain by being so suspicious? That's what Zero wants. You know. What Zero wants? Exactly. This game is set up by Zero, wasn't it? Any game has a winner and a loser. Whoever makes it through door 9 is a winner, and those who don't are the losers. Zero's trying to make us fight against one another for that victory. Then you're saying that Zero is trying to split us up by making us fight each other? Yes. That is why we can't let ourselves fall prey to suspicion. We have to trust one another and form a strong bond of friendship. Otherwise we'll end up ensnared by Zero's manipulations. Then does that mean that the person who killed Snake? Yes, almost certainly Zero himself. If there's anyone we should doubt, it should be Zero. He masterminded this game and kidnapped all of us. Doesn't it seem reasonable that you would have killed Snake as well? Junpei hadn't really considered that. Well, what I was saying at the start, when the 9th man was killed off, he kept screaming, he's a liar. It's like, you know, it doesn't work. So I'm kind of sticking to the fact that Zero told him to do that. Like, he probably gave him a note saying that if you go through the door, blah blah, just to prove that someone can die. You know, this is a serious game. But maybe with Snake as well, he decided, you're right, there is gonna have to be someone left behind. Why don't you let me make that decision for you? That kind of thing. Because they all seem to do the numbers okay without Snake. You know, they got through the doors alright. And I'm pretty sure they can get through door number 9, maybe. Let's see. Junpei hadn't really considered that. If Zero had killed Snake, then Zero was on the ship with them. Was Zero still on the ship with them? I want to say so since he was on the loudspeakers. But so I want to say yes because we heard him on the loudspeakers, but obviously that could be a recording, and since this is it's not exactly a copy of the Titanic, you know, so there's alteration, so he could be calling from somewhere other than the ship. Well, I'm not sure. He wasn't sure. Hey, I'm just wondering about one thing. And what's that? How can you be so sure that Zero's on this ship? Ace's eyebrows shot up. Really, Junpei? I confess I'm a little disappointed. Usually you're rather sharp. Isn't it obvious? Obvious? How so? This ship. Huh? Zero said this ship several times when he addressed us. Ah, I am Zero, the captain of this ship. The purpose of this purpose of the game is to keep it is simple. Leave the ship alive. As you've no doubt surmised, this ship has begun to sink. Ah, okay. Alright, I'll give him that. He's clever. If you weren't here, he wouldn't say this ship, would he? He'd be saying something like that ship or the ship. Oh. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Ace's explanation made perfect sense. Junpei felt a little foolish they hadn't seen it himself. I know, I do. Still, he was left with a question, and it was of no small importance. If Zero's on the ship, where is he? I'm guessing the captain's quarters. Suddenly, everyone went very quiet. The silence was cold and clammy, and Junpei could feel it crawling across his back and around his throat. Again he heard the ghosting, moaning noise.